Last week in Nature Speaks, we saw a literal donkey speak. This week, these are 4 horses, but they have to be heavenly, spirit-type horses because they're in heaven. So they have to have some special capacity to be living in heaven. And I'm calling the lesson this week, Hold Your Horses. Now, that term dates back to ancient Greece. As a matter of fact, in Iliad by Homer, it is quoted there. And pretty much what they meant by that saying was, you need to slow your roll or cool your jets, that you're moving too quickly. Horseback was the mode of operation at that time, as well as horse-drawn vehicles. We use it today in terms like I just said, and we might use it in a phrase like, Susie, you need to hold your horses. You've only known that man for a week. You cannot accept his proposal. So that's how we normally use that phrase. There are 4 horses coming from heaven that introduce hell on earth. They usher in the end times by bringing a horrific period for the people who are dwelling on earth. As we study the 4 horses of the apocalypse, you'll wish that God would hold these horses back a little bit longer. You want to know why? People you and I know and we love aren't saved yet. And we don't want them to endure the things we're going to learn about. I'm saying, yes, even so come quickly, but Lord, not that quick. That there's some work to be done before then. Now, Revelation, John the Apostle is caught up in heaven to give a glimpse, to be able to see what was going to happen on earth in the end times. Revelation 5 and 6, that we're going to look at today, he sees Jesus as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, given a scroll with 7 seals on it. He breaks those first 4 seals, and 4 corresponding horses with their loathsome riders are unleashed on the earth. The first horse is white, and it characterizes the Antichrist. The second horse is red, depicting war. The third horse is black, bringing famine. And finally, the pale horse brings death. Now, there's a logical progression to what's happening in these horses. When the Antichrist comes, things start to bring turmoil, which brings war, which brings famine, which brings disease. It's almost as though they are tethered to one another. War, at least large-scale world war, is a sure sign that Jesus Christ is coming soon. He prophesied in Matthew 24, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come." Is World War III coming? Trump thinks so. And I'm sure he has intel that he is given to do that. But more so than that, General Jack Keane warns that the U.S. is on a pathway toward world war. He referred to a recent congressional commission, and it says the U.S. faces the most serious and most challenging threat since 1945. Including a potential for a near-term major war. It also found that China and Russia are major powers seeking to undermine the U.S. and that, quote, the U.S. military lacks both the capabilities and capacity required to be confident it can deter and prevail in that upcoming combat. That's a place we haven't been in for a really long time. Before we look at these colorful steeds, John wants us to join him in heaven in the throne room with angels and elders and four creatures. And God, who's seated on the throne, raises up the scroll, and an angel cries out, "Who is worthy to unleash the scroll and break its seals?" So let's look at Revelation 5, verse 1. "And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written, inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaim with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals?' And to no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. So I wept much, because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or to look at it. But one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and loose its 7 seals.' And I looked. Behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as though it had been slain, having 7 horns, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. Then he came and took the scroll out of the hand of him who sat on the throne." So this is our heavenly scene. It's incredible. I would love to have been John, maybe. I bet it was also terrifying. John sees this invaluable scroll in the hand of God on the throne, written within and without. And in those days, scribes wrote on scrolls very much like this. And they wrote them sequentially, like chapters in a book. They would write one chapter, roll it up, and put a seal on it, a wax seal. Then they'd write the next chapter, and the next chapter, and the next chapter. And so what this did is it meant that the person who read this scroll had to read it sequentially. They couldn't just read the first chapter and skip to the end. They had to go by it chapter by chapter, verse by verse. Also, the only person who could break the seal was the one who had the authority to do so. So it also kept a seal secure. Title deeds to property were also often written on scrolls and sealed with 7 seals during this phase of history. The will of Roman emperors, Vespasian and Caesar Augustus, were on scrolls with 7 seals. Scholars, including my husband, believe that this is the title deed to the earth. You see, the control of the earth was lost in the garden when Adam and Eve ate of the tree of good and evil and were banished. Something happened, a transaction happened that made things untenable. As a matter of fact, in Luke 4, we have an encounter of Jesus with Satan in the desert. When Satan tempted Jesus, he showed him, it says, the kingdoms of the world in an instant. All this authority I will give to you. Listen, all the authority and their glory, for this has been delivered to me. I give it to whomever I will. Therefore, if you worship me, all will be yours. You can see why that temptation was a temptation, because Satan was saying, you don't have to go to the cross. You don't have to be whipped and tortured and scourged. I'll just give you the scroll now. And of course, Jesus says, he will not be tempted. Get thee behind me, so to speak. So that's the scroll. And the scroll could not be opened. Remember, they looked on heaven and earth and under the earth. Anyone who could open the scroll, no one could be found. And so it says that John wept much. Dr. Criswell wrote this, and it's the most beautiful thing I read about this sobbing. John's tears represent the tears of all of God's people throughout the centuries. They're the tears of Adam and Eve as they view the still form of their dead son Abel and the awful consequences of their disobedience. They are the tears of all the children of Israel in bondage as they cried to God for deliverance from affliction and slavery. They are the sobs and tears wrung from the hearts and souls of God's people as they've stood beside graves of loved ones and experienced the indescribable heartaches and disappointments of life. Such is the curse that sin had upon God's beautiful creation. No wonder John wept so fervently. If no Redeemer could be found to remove the curse, it meant that God's creation was forever consigned to remain in the hands of Satan. So you can now recognize how absolutely tormented John was at the thought of this. Well, of course, the scroll and the sobbing leads to the Savior, and it changes everything. Jesus steps forward as the lion and the lamb. The lion of the tribe of Judah is what we first behold him as. It's based on Jacob's blessing to his son Judah. The lion was Judah's symbol that they carried on their flags, and they were known as the kingly tribe because that was the tribe of David. Lions symbolize power, fierceness, and majesty. Jacob told Judah, "You are a lion's club, Judah. You return to prey, my son, like a lion that crouches and lays down." Jacob gave a messianic prophecy of the future when he said the scepter and the ruler staff would never depart from Judah. And it did stay in the line, and Jesus is from Judah, the lion of the tribe of Judah. Now, John turns to look at this lion, and as he does, the lion turns into a lamb, as though it had been slain. It reminds us of when the same apostle declared, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." Remember when John was in the wilderness at the baptism of Jesus? Don't forget this moment. John is in heaven. He's just seen the brilliance of the throne of God with a rainbow around it, heavenly creatures, including elders and these odd living creatures with 4 faces. And there is Jesus, who still bears the scars of his crucifixion. The lamb as though he had been slain. When Jesus rose from the dead, he still bore scars on his hands, his feet, his side, and his brow. In that state, he rose into heaven and sat at the right hand of God. And he will bear those scars as love tokens through all eternity. So John turns to the lion who is the lamb, and you can see the power and the meekness, the strength and the humility, all in this one thing. And so what happens is we turn, and it says in verse 6, "Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, 'Come and see.' And looked, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he went out conquering and to conquer." So this is the first horse. It's the white horse. Now, some people have called the Antichrist lots of aliases. Greg Laurie wrote, "In the Bible, he's called the man of sin, the son of perdition, the little horn, the wicked one, the prince who is to come, the one who makes desolate, and of course, the beast." But most of us know him as the Antichrist. And what it really means is someone who stands opposed to Christ, someone against Christ, someone who is not really the Christ. They're a fake, an imposter, masquerading. Skip writes, "This will be the earth's darkest hour. If you're a believer in Christ, however, you don't have to be afraid. In the same way that John was caught up into heaven, you will be too. And just as John saw God's fearful judgments from heaven's vantage point, you will too. So there's a whole theological thing about this, but no, you're in heaven. And what John's seeing, you get to watch unfold. I put a chart up here to kind of differentiate, because generally when you see a white horse, you think of Jesus, because in Revelation 19, Jesus comes on a white horse. So yes, indeed, they both come on white horses. One, the Antichrist, wears one crown, and it's described more as a victor's crown, like a laurel wreath that you'd get in the Olympics that kind of withers away, whereas Jesus comes with many crowns, and those are known as royal diadem, that they're royal crowns. Now, the Antichrist is given a bow with no arrows, and Jesus will have a sharp sword. The Antichrist initiates the Great Tribulation, and Jesus will end it. The Antichrist will start this horrible war on earth, and Jesus will end it. So it's good just at the beginning to frame in your mind who is who in this. I want to give you 5 attributes, 5 things that define the Antichrist. The first is, I think these will blow your mind, because you're just picking this awful shaved tooth, red horn, horrible thing, and that's not it. When he emerges on the scene, he'll come in at economically hard times. And he'll do what no other president, prime minister, or world leader has ever done. He will bring global economic stability. All of a sudden, everything, the pound, the yen, the lira, all the denominations, all the places, there is now a great economy. Daniel prophesied this in Daniel 11:43. He said, "He shall have power over the hidden treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his step." It appears, as we go further in Revelation, he will be the leader controlling the world's economy. Under his leadership, it appears, everything will be globalized. It would seem that no person will be able to buy or sell without his permission. That's where we get the 666. Revelation 13:16. He causes all, both small and great, both poor and rich, both free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, so that no one may buy or sell except he who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. So he will have financial genius. I said this to my sister today, and she named a few people. And I was like, that's a fun game to play, and I don't even want to say them out loud, because then you're going, oh, I can't believe you think that that's the Antichrist. But when you start hearing these things, she said Elon Musk, okay? Now, I don't know, maybe he can do global economies. There's things that would make this not possible as well. The next thing is he has flattering words. Daniel describes the Antichrist as a world leader renowned for his eloquent speech. Picture that. Someone that's like a JFK, who's handsome, a great orator, and that people just flock to. It says in Daniel 7:25, he shall speak pompous words. John confirms later in Revelation 13:5, he was given a mouth speaking great things. So now, I don't know, who's a good orator? You're like, oh, maybe that's the Antichrist. Oh, this is a game we ought not to play. Barack Obama was a really, really good speaker. Someone went, oh, that's what I was thinking. Okay, I don't think it's any of these people, but it makes your mind think of the Antichrist differently, doesn't it? So flattering words. Number 3, he fixes the temple or lays the foundation of the temple. In Revelation 11:1, John says, I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and an angel stood and said, rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there. So when this Antichrist comes, one of the things he will do is rebuild the temple. This will be the 3rd temple. Not Solomon's, not Herod's, but the Antichrist's temple. The tribulation temple will be built early in the first half of the tribulation under the patronage of the Antichrist. And when he does, it allows Orthodox Jews to practice their faith by offering sacrifices according to the Mosaic law. Do you know how long the Jews have waited to have a temple in Jerusalem? And you know why they don't? They don't have possession of the Temple Mount. And on the Temple Mount is the 3rd most important building for Muslims. And so this would start World War III if you blew up that building. For some reason, the Antichrist will come on the scene and he will broker a deal. Think of Gaza, of Israel, the Jews, and the Arabs. This guy is so good, he brokers a deal and somehow is able to give the Jews the ability to worship God once again. There are 2 existing organizations in Israel that are so close to making this possible. The name of the one is called the 3rd Temple Organization. They have made an exact model of the 3rd temple created in a 1:50 scale. The building would measure 150 meters by 150 meters, and they say, quote, construction will begin once these plans receive a building permit and current buildings are removed. Little asterisk there. The other organization that prepares for this is called the Temple Institute. If you ever go with us to Israel, we visit that every time we go. And they have been spending decades of procuring everything you would need for a temple to exist so that Jews could be worshiping. Janae's going, yep. Do you know they actually found red heifers, which we thought were extinct, and had them shipped to Israel, and they are breeding red heifers, which must be used for sacrifices. There are so many things. They have found Levites who could be priests, Kohath tribe who could be like high priests from the tribe of Aaron. Not only that, they have been making most of the implements, the holy implements. They have made the gold menorah that would be in the holy place. They have made the high priest jeweled breastplate. So it's possible. One place is working on the architectural plans. The other place is getting all the accoutrements to be able to have worship in the temple as soon as this Antichrist appears. Everything will be ready. The next thing that he will be known for is a fake peace. In Matthew 24:4, it says, "Take heed that no one deceives you," Jesus said. "For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many." The Antichrist masquerades as the Messiah. As a matter of fact, there are many Jewish rabbis that do not believe Jesus is the Messiah, and they are waiting for Jesus to come on the scene. And when this poser comes on the scene, they're going to only too readily receive him because he's going to do what they've been waiting for them to do. The Jews will be utterly deceived. Now, he's wearing a crown, just like Jesus wears crowns. And we mentioned that he has a bow, but no arrows. It would seem that the Antichrist brings peace without a shot fired. Yeah, right? He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to make war for this first 3.5 years. He's the golden child. Everything he touches, economy, his speech, the temple, all these things, he's just showing that he is the one the world has been waiting for. Imagine the one who brokers peace with Israel and Palestine. I mean, how many years, how many Camp David Accords, how many times? We're in the middle of it now, trying to broker a ceasefire and can't seem to make it happen. 1 Thessalonians 5:3 of this time says, when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman. They shall not escape. They will have let the fox into the hen house, and there's going to be no escaping it. John MacArthur in his commentary said, before things get bad, they're going to get better. The Bible predicts such a time. The Bible predicts that there's coming a world peace, and it will come. But listen, it will be a deceptive peace. It will be a false sense of security. It will be the most subtle, the most deceptive trap that has ever been set, because it'll catch the world in it. Catch them at will and destroy them at will. This is such a, you're watching, no, have you watched it? Don't do that. Don't open that. Don't do that. You're watching a scary movie. Don't go in there. It's like if we're in heaven and we're watching this, no, don't let him build that temple. You're going to want to be involved in trying to stop this trap from being set. And then ultimately, at 3.5 years into this reign that's peaceful, in the middle of the 7 years tribulation, we will find out his false motives. There will be peace and prosperity, and then the Antichrist will show his true colors. He will disrupt that temple sacrifice, and he will desecrate the temple, either by putting up an image of the beast or demanding to be worshipped as God. Whatever it is, it will trigger the Great Tribulation. There was a man in history called Antiochus Epiphanes, and he interrupted temple worship during the Roman era by sacrificing a pig, right, a non-kosher animal in the temple. And they called that the desolation. This will be the abomination of desolation. It's going to be really bad. Daniel 11:31 says, an arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Now, that's creepy. Because I've been telling you he's handsome, and he's got buttery words, and then all of a sudden we go, but I think it's like pulling the mask off. It's like now he be known for who he is and what his intentions are. And all bets are off. Jesus warned that someone or something that was sacrilegious would stand in the temple. And when that horror occurs, he tells the Jews to run for the Judean wilderness and hide in the mountains. When that happens, it's really, really bad. And he says, now you people better run and hide, because all bets are off. So that's the white horse. I know we spent a lot of the teaching on him, but you can't help it. So much of this period is impacted by him. So in verses 3 and 4 it says, and when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, come and see. Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword. Now, red here, the word John uses for red, is kind of like naming a color for fire, which would be like orange, red, yellow. And in heaven, red is the color of horror. Here it's the red horse in Revelation 6. In Revelation 12, it's the red dragon. In Revelation 17, it's the red beast. And I think that's why red has become synonymous with Satan, because it depicts his fierce wrath. And don't you know that Satan and his gang will be thrown into an eternal lake of fire? It's apropos for what, yeah. The horse will remove all peace from the earth. Now, how many of you think the earth is peaceful currently? No, I know that's why Jack Keane and other people are saying we're on the precipice. You've got Ukraine and Russia and Gaza and Sudan. But while it may feel like the world is at war, it's not. The most peaceful places on earth are Iceland and New Zealand. Now, partly because they're islands. So it's kind of hard to start war there. But also European countries are quite peaceful. Denmark, Switzerland, Austria all make the top 10 countries that are peaceful. Now imagine a world with no peace. Nowhere. When I had the privilege to go to Jordan for Reload Love, a group of us went to a city called Mafraq, which is just about 5 clicks away from the Syrian border. It was during the Syrian civil war, and all of these women were invited to a church, and they were given health classes, but that meant it was an opportunity to share the gospel with them. And they came in with their burqas, really just showing this much, above and below. And as soon as we came in the room, they took their burqa down, because it was just women. And they couldn't wait to tell you and talk to you. And they had made food for us. And they said things had gotten so bad in Syria, the civil war, the conflict, that it wasn't just nation against nation or tribe against tribe. It was people against people, neighbor against neighbor, family against family. That even members of your family or neighbors would rat you out to get favor with the government. They tried to explain you could trust nobody. Is that how you feel right now? That's what it will be like then when this red horse comes. No peace anywhere among neighbors, family, cities, countries, states. No peace. He removes peace from the earth. It's a horrifying concept. The red horse sets the world ablaze with fighting, the such of likes we have never seen, with raw aggression, religious fervor, and unbridled greed. And think about, in the last 100 years, we've had 2 world wars, a Cold War, and many other sub-wars. But in the 20th and 21st century, science and technology have created fateful, frightful weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear warhead, intercontinental weapons, space-based weapons. And scientists have created chemical and biological weapons that could annihilate hundreds of thousands with just one leak. It's just the whole thing goes off when the red horse comes to town. Now in verses 5 and 6 it says, when he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse. And he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures say, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, but do not harm the oil and the wine." Famine is a frightening thing, and I would venture to say most of you have never had to tackle with it. Really, most people in the United States have not had to. Do you know that more than 2 million Koreans have died in the past decade in North Korea because of food shortages, caused by a combination of floods, drought, and bad government? Kim Jong-un, the national dictator, has withheld so much from his people. In fact, crippling food shortages have forced the poor to survive by eating grass and tree bark. That's a famine. I read an article by a man named Huang. He was 24 years old from North Hanggang province. He was homeless and lived alone since he was 9 years old. He said, "I ate several kinds of wild foods, such as nyongjae, which is a wild grass found in the fields. It's poisonous, so the next day your face swells up. But I made it into a hot soup to just assuage the hunger in my stomach." It's hard for us to imagine a world with no peace, but now a world that is starving to death because you know what? Famine follows war. Crops are burned, cows are killed. There is nothing. As a matter of fact, when the Ukraine war started, I was with Franklin Graham, Skip and I, and he said, you know, there's going to be a famine in Ukraine because so much has been destroyed in this. And he said that the best thing we can do as organizations that help is to start sending food and preparing food. And if you guys remembered, we did 500,000 nutrient-rich meals that we sent to Ukraine and Uganda because after war comes famine. The rider with the scales represents now the collapse of the global economy, as the vision includes the voice of merchants selling amounts of grain for a denarius. A little bit of grain cost a day's wage. In the Bible, wheat is measured, not weighed. But it becomes so precious during this famine, they are weighing it, every single grain of it, that it becomes like gold. And interestingly, it says that oil and wine were not touched, which alludes to the disparity between the rich and the poor. It would seem the rich can still get oil and wine, or for some reason, maybe it's a mercy that God doesn't allow the grapes and the olive trees to be demolished. Don't know exactly what it means, but that is one small mercy. And then comes the pale horse, verses 7 and 8. He opened the 4th seal. I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. Beasts are going to be so carnivorous, they will be eating humans and hunting humans. Now, the color of this 4th horse, they say, is pale, but it comes from a word that means yellowish green, like the color of a sickly plant. Or you know how the emoji of the sick green thing vomiting up? It's that awful green color, which just means something's really not healthy. The seals, as we've said, have this accumulative effect False religion causes instability, which leads to war, which leads to malnutrition, which leads to a social breakdown, and human beings are more susceptible to disease, this pestilence that comes. It says 1/4 of the world's population will die. I have a clock, right? There are 8 billion people alive today. This is the current world population going up and down, showing you deaths and births. Imagine 8 billion people, and after these 4 horses, 2 billion are dead. And if that's not frightening enough, the horrifying cliffhanger is it says that this pale horse comes and is followed by Hades. Now, Hades and hell are synonymous terms. Hell is in his dust coming up behind him. Hades is known as a place for departed souls. It's known as a place of eternal punishment for the unrighteous. I don't know about you. I don't want my loved ones to be here when those 4 horses gallop, but I sure don't want them to end up in hell, as hell follows behind. And so I want to say, hold your horses. God, hold your horses. And that's nice. That's a really lovely prayer. Oh, God, hold your horses. But what's the point of holding the horses if you and I aren't praying and preaching? If you and I aren't sharing the gospel with the people we love, what is the point of God waiting? Because how else will they be saved? How do you think it's going to happen? Paul wrote in Romans 10:14, "How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one who they haven't heard about? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can they preach unless they are sent? It is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news." Ladies, right now you have people in your heart and in your mind. Write that down. Write that down in your notes. The people that you do not want to encounter, the 4 horses of the apocalypse. And then make a plan. Do something, say something, send a book. If you're too afraid to talk, send a tape. Whatever it is that you can move them closer to being saved. Skip and I were saved in the late 60s, 70s, and there was the first Christian rock and roll artist, Larry Norman. And he wrote this song called 666. That talks about this exact time period. Let's listen to that for a minute.
In the midst of the war, he offered us peace. He came like a lover from out of the east, with the face of an angel and the heart of a beast. His intentions were 666. He walked up to the temple with gold in his hand, and he bought off the priests and propositioned the land. And the world was his harlot and laid in the sand, while the band played 666. We served at his table and slept on the floor, but he starved us and beat us and nailed us to the door. Well, I'm ready die. I can't take any more. And I'm sick of his lies and his tricks. He told us he loved us, but that was a lie. There was blood in his pockets and death in his eyes. Well, my number is up, and I'm willing to die if the band will play sick, sick. If the band will play 666. If the band will play 666.
Woof. I know the last two teachings have been pretty tough, but don't you think the end is near? Don't you think Jesus' coming is sooner than what's ever been? And doesn't that mean that we should be about our Father's business? Because you can't take anything to heaven except another human being that is saved because you have shared the gospel with them. Ladies, I pray that God will put a fire under you and that you will be bold as lions and meek as a lamb. And you will share the good news, not just with people you love, but people you see and you meet at the grocery store, in a restaurant, at school. Because it's what we need to be doing, because this is coming all too soon, and for now, God is holding his horses.